Hello, welcome to Gardener's World. This is the writing garden, and the colour theme in here, as you might have guessed, is white. And at this time of year, it's doing its white thing rather well. We've got a combination of the white allium Everest, which is at its best. We've got the Silene, the bladderwort, which is absolutely lovely. There's some astrantia and a few of the white comasias, so it's all coming together. However, I have two little problems to deal with. The minor one first. This Aquilegia, very nice, but completely the wrong colour. It's an intruder, a bigger problem. This foliage, which belongs to Leucojum, the summer snowflake. Now, summer snowflake is like a giant snowdrop that flowers in spring, not summer, and I love it. Don't want to get rid of it completely, but it has very vigorous foliage that is thick and takes quite a long time to die back, and in the process flops and suppresses anything that's underneath it. I don't want to cut it back, because if you cut back spring flowering bulbs, you reduce the chance of either good quality or perhaps even any flowers at all next spring. What I've been doing for the last few years is digging some up. You can see I've got a good clump of bulbs, probably about 30, 40 bulbs in that clump. Now, if I put that in the wheelbarrow, it means I can pot it up in a plastic pot, stick it to one side, let the foliage die back, and then I will plant the bulbs, not back in here, but into grass. And now I've got a bit of space that I can plant into. Now, coming up on today's programme. Nick completes his iris odyssey with a celebration of Siberian irises.
Here is another example of really successful hybridisation. This plant has moved away from the sort of standard blues that you see with most Sibericas. The crossing has introduced a reddy tone. And of course, the two pushed together creates this extraordinary pink.
We meet someone who set about creating her dream cottage garden with no previous gardening experience at all.
First thing that I did was I got some cottage garden books. I wasn't sure what plants to use, what trees to use. Any book that had cottage garden in the title was good for me.
Arit visits a project in London that turns those lost urban corners into places of colour, life and joy.
So these were just two empty tarmac corners, this one and that one. There used to be a willow tree in each corner, which the council had to take out. And then it was just empty tarmac. And people threw washing machines and things in.
And I shall be adding another clematis to the cottage garden and also planting out some more veg. In the centre of the jewel garden, we have this brick square and 4 large pots. These beautiful Italian pots are my pride and joy. So they're important in themselves, but as far as the jewel garden goes, they set the tone. Literally, it revolves around them. So every year we think long and hard about what we're going to have as our summer display, and we try and do something a bit different every year. And in the past, we've really focused on plants that will grow big and dramatic and need lots of compost and feeding and watering. But this year, I'm going in the opposite direction. Because what I have here is a barrow load of very poor compost. Now, when I say poor, it's actually perfect for what I want, but we've got some spent compost from the tulips. And the word spent means that nearly all the nutrition has gone out of it. It's very gritty, so therefore it's going to be free draining and low in nutrition. And the plants that I'm going to put in there will thrive in those conditions. Now, let's pull that out of the way for the moment. We might need to top it up. Now, for any big pot, there is that saying that you need a pillar, a filler and a spiller. So the pillar gives you height, a filler does the middle ground, and then a spiller to come up over the edge. Now, my pillar is this. This is a grass. It's Miscanthus sinensis malpartus. And when it's happy, this will start to flower in early August. And it's got wonderful, rich, burgundy, plum-coloured flowers, which is great for the jewel garden. So that will sit in the middle. Around that, I'm going to put this. Now, this doesn't look like much now, but this is Nautia macedonica, with these wonderful, sort of very cerise, cherry red flowers. They're scabious. But there is a problem with growing in our rich clay loam. It grows and then it flops dreadfully because actually it thrives best in poor conditions. So in this very free draining poor soil, hopefully it'll be more upright and will sort of make its flowers twine through in between these grasses. So we've got quite an ethereal feel. And for our sub-story, I've got this. Now, I know this as Sedum purple emperor. It has been reclassified as Hylotelephium. And it's got these lovely pinky purple leaves and then will flower in late summer, marvellous for butterflies, and go on flowering well into October. So that will go so that it's around the edge. I've also got some seeds of nasturtiums that are my spiller. And when they germinate, they will come over and they will spill over the edge. And the whole point about growing nasturtiums is the richer the soil, they'll grow perfectly well, but they will flower badly. If you want nasturtiums to flower well, they must have fairly poor soil and good drainage. Right, let's get planting. Let's put that in there for the moment. Now, the planting of a pot is easy enough. So we just take that out. You can see, nice root system, make a hole and pop it in. It's in the middle. So we'll put the Nautia in first. So just to place them, to make sure I get them in the right portions. So that will be like that. And then the sedums like that. This is a bit of an experiment, but if it works, I think it'll look lovely. All these will be planted into the borders at the end of the season. So these are all completely recyclable. I won't need to feed these because all that will do with this particular group of plants is promote leaf growth. To get the best flowering, we want to slightly starve them, and that should give us the best display because it feels counterintuitive, but it should work. Right, the last bit I have to do to this is sow some seed. And I've got a lovely nasturtium called Black Velvet. Beautiful, sort of rich, browny, blacky, deep purple colour. And they will spill over and grow right down. So what I'm going to do is put one like that, one like that, one there. And I'm not going to put one at the back because you won't see it. So those can go in there. So we've got 4, and that should give us the coverage we want. And I've got 2 packets, so I should just have enough to do all 4 pots. Right, having got my pattern, I can now pot up the next pot identically to that. Now, a few weeks ago, Nick celebrated the bearded iris, one of the most spectacular plants that anybody could grow in their garden. But they do have very specific conditions they need to thrive in. And this week, he's looking at those iris that grow beautifully, but in very different conditions.
Of all the plants which enhance our gardens in spring and early summer, for many, it's the iris which has special allure. With their myriad colours and distinct forms, they're a plant which can easily steal the show. And very often, it's bearded irises that grab the attention with their flamboyant flowers in the full colour spectrum.
Bearded irises certainly do deliver, but only in a particular set of circumstances where they have full sun and free-draining soil. However, there are a whole set of beardless irises which are infinitely more adaptable and will happily grow alongside plants in your borders in a way that bearded irises certainly won't.
Beardless irises are divided into a number of different groups, the most well-known of which are the Siberian irises. They're adaptable plants, and here at Goddington House in Kent, they're showcased inside a beautiful walled garden.
I think they look absolutely stunning, growing alongside other herbaceous plants in a border like this. All they really ask for is a moisture-retentive soil. Now, if you haven't got that, you can simply improve your soil by adding organic matter. My preference for that is usually farmyard manure.
Many of the Siberian irises we've grown in our gardens today are derived from two main species, Iris siberica and Iris sanguinea. Iris siberica, which is native to Central and Eastern Europe, has up to 5 elegant blue flowers on each stem, held well above the narrow grass-like leaves.
But in contrast to Siberica, this particular plant shows much more of its sanguinea parentage. And you can see that initially in the leaf blades. They're wider and slightly more lax. And then looking at the flowers themselves, you've got 2 buds up at the top as opposed to 5. The flowers themselves tend to be more nestled in the foliage rather than elevated above. Overall, the flower form is flatter, and that's what makes it so distinct.
Modern-day cultivars also come in a wider range of colours, giving us yet more choice in the garden.
And here is another example of really successful hybridisation. This plant has moved away from the sort of standard blues that you see with most Sibericas. The crossing has introduced a reddy tone, and of course the two pushed together creates this extraordinary pink. It's very, very unusual. There's a blue undertone to it, there's sort of a mauviness, and what that means is at dusk this colour will pop out as well. What's particularly special about this cultivar, it's called Sparkling Rose, is the yellow at the top of the falls, and it's effectively a signal that tells pollinators this is where the good stuff is.
And there's no reason to restrict these highly adaptable plants to a cottage garden setting either. I've seen them used to great effect in contemporary show gardens and Japanese gardens. But there is a species that thrives in more specific conditions.
Bearded iris love to be in baking sunshine and dry soils. Siberian iris like to be in quite moist soils. But our native iris, Iris pseudochorus, loves to have its feet in the water. And you can see on the edge of this pond here, it's very happily naturalised in those kind of marginal boggy edges. Now, it's a pretty big plant that will run wild, so it's not the sort of thing that you'd introduce to a compact pond, but if you've got a big space like this, it's ideal.
For more typical garden ponds, Iris lavigata and the American water iris, Iris versicolor, will be far more appropriate and certainly much better behaved. Aside from ponds, there are other ways to enjoy irises in a more naturalistic setting.
And I think they look particularly beautiful here, growing through this wild area of grass. Now, creating meadows is notoriously difficult, especially if you're starting them from seed or from plugs. But an easy way to cheat a meadow is to allow an area of your ordinary lawn to run wild and grow tall, and then plant in herbaceous species which are able to cope with the long grass, such as the Siberian irises. And you can see they're just scattered through here and add an extra layer of colour to the meadow, which I think is beautiful.
Exploring the world of Siberian irises has been fascinating, but combined with their bearded relatives, the iris genus as a whole offers a truly unique blend of colour and glamour. And although they're traditionally associated with late spring and summer, don't forget the remnant irises that have the ability to bloom again in autumn, along with that star of the winter border, Iris reticulata.
Iris is the Greek word for rainbow. But while rainbows are fleeting and elusive, with the right range of iris, it's possible to have glorious colour in your garden throughout the year.
Well, like everybody, I adore irises, and I wanted to grow bearded iris here in the jewel garden. I tried for years, but they never really liked it because there was too much competition and the soil was a bit too heavy. And as soon as I moved them to a dry, sunny spot, they thrived. But the Siberian irises grow really well in our soil, and don't be put off by thinking that you need it to be actively damp. As long as you have a heavy-ish moisture retentive soil, i.e. anything with clay in it, they'll be happy. They're very, very adaptable. Now I've adapted too because I've changed my mind about these pots. I had a look at the first one I did and I came to the conclusion it was a bit empty. And I did have a tray of these. This is an ipomea, and actually it's sweet potato, and a dark purple variety, and it will form a mound. I've not grown it before. I bought it on the off chance and decided against it, but I think it'll work well. So we'll pop this in here. One final thing I'm going to do is cut the Nautia back. When you grow Nautia macedonica in a border, once the flowering has lost its first flush, and they do flower intermittently, so you have to be fairly ruthless about this, it's a good idea to cut them back and then they will regrow and you'll get a second flush. But I want these to be slightly stockier. So what I'm going to do is just take that back there like that, take that back like that, and that will give me a slightly bushier plant. Finally, whatever you're planting, whatever the container is, whatever the plants are, whatever compost mix you've used, water them in well. That not only gives them moisture, but it also helps settle the roots. And although these are plants that thrive in fairly poor conditions and adapt to dry and good drainage, they will need watering. If it doesn't rain, they'll get a weekly water. It's just they won't be fed. Now, it's time to visit the first of your gardens this week. And it's taking us to a small garden just outside Portsmouth.
Hello, my name's Jenny Warner and we have a very small garden here, so we make the most of old pots and we keep all our plants in different old pots and rotate them round so we maximise the colour from them. Part of the garden is about 10 feet across, just outside the back door. The other part of the garden about 20 feet square. But one thing I wanted to show you today was our auricular theatre and how we made this auricular theatre from an old fire screen. So what it has, we used the original screen, kept the old wooden handle. We had to extend it slightly, add in a bottom and a recess, 2 simple wooden shelves, and keep our auriculars in here. And this is an east facing wall, so it keeps the auriculars nicely out of the sun and out of the rain as well. This shelf here, which is particularly pretty, I think. So I move them around, and down here I've got my sort of extra stock. As they come into flower, I move these up to the auricular theatre. So I keep those on an old garden sieve so they're nicely drained, because that's the risk with auriculars in particular. You don't want them to be in cold water. And so that's our auricular theatre. We're calling in to look at our little garden, small space but packed to the brim, and we utilise every inch of it.
Thanks, Jenny, and I do love an auricular theatre. I've got a clematis that I want to put here in the cottage garden, and it's to replace one that failed, I think is the only way to describe it, last year. It didn't die as such because we got a little bit of regrowth this year, but it died back right to the ground. Now, there is such a thing called clematis wilt, which is a fungus that wilts the whole of the top growth, which can regrow from below the soil. But this was a group 3 clematis, that's the late flowering type, and that is not known to get wilt, so it's quite strange. However, I'm going to plant another one. Now, whatever clematis you plant, whether it's group 1, 2 or 3, this is the technique that's worth using for all of them. And just to be clear, group 1 clematis are the early flowering ones, the ones that flower before the end of May, all of them. We're talking about Clematis montana or Clematis alpina or Armandii. Then group 2 are the large flowering ones, lot of very famous ones like Marie Boisselot or Mrs. Chomley, or they have big flowers in May, June and into July, and sometimes again later. And group 3 have a mass of small flowers that never flower before June, and sometimes not till July, but they will go on flowering. Well, some of them will actually flower almost till Christmas if it's mild. Now, the one I'm going to plant is a group 3. Now, you can see the soil here is actually rather dry, which is bad news because clematis do best in cool, rather moist conditions. They hate baking sun and they hate drying out at their roots. Right, well, you can see I've dug what looks like an extravagant hole, but what I have got is a very healthy amount of compost. This is a big, vigorous climber that really needs plenty of moisture and food, so this is going to help. I'll take that, so I'm just going to tip this in the hole. Like that, and the rest can be mulch. Now, I haven't said which variety this is. This is a variety called Prince Charles. A slight reason is because it's the Jubilee year and there's a royal connection, but the real reason is because this is a soft, bluey mauve colour. And that exactly hits the right tone here for the cottage garden. Take it out of the pot. Now, you'll sometimes see me tease the roots away from the side of a pot. Don't do that with the clematis. What you want to do is tease the roots from the bottom of the pot. And the reason for that is you don't want much lateral growth. It's too close to the surface, and the closer the roots are to the surface, the more they dry out. What you want is the roots to go down. Second thing is, all clematis plant them deep. Go up to the first leaf, bury it an inch or 2 deep. And the reason for doing that is that it means that it will grow roots from the stem underground. And if it gets wilt, it means that everything above ground can be killed, but it will still live on from this stem underground and regrow. Right, let's get this in the ground. So I can make a hole in my hand, put this in the middle. Now, what I'm going to do is backfill around it. Now, I say plant deep, but that is well below the soil surface, so I will bring the soil up around it, and I'm going to mulch it very generously. But before I do, I'm going to water it, because if I water it and then mulch, that will slow down the evaporation of the water and keep it in. And a big trug like this is a bucket load. Don't worry about going on the plant too much. We'll put it round the edge. If it's new, keep it watered. A bucket of water a week will do no harm at all initially. And every spring, for any clematis you grow, make sure it's really well weeded, water it, thickly mulch it, and that will set it up for the year. Now, a year ago, we went to visit the garden of Nyla Abraham. And we were intrigued by her story because she admitted that she had practically no gardening knowledge and certainly no gardening education. But what she did have was a powerful dream.
I go to bed at night and I dream about the garden and what's going to happen the next day. I dream about what plants are growing and what plants I could grow. I dream about how to make the garden more secret, more magical. It's like painting. It's like painting with flowers. It's like this massive creativity, except it's all growing and it's all real and it's all moving, and that's what's so magical about gardening. My name's Nyla. I've lived here in the edge of Bath for 7 years with my husband Paul and my daughter Skye. When we first arrived at the garden, there were loads of shrubs, loads of like overgrown shrubs, and there was a big huge laurel tree, there was a really beautiful magnolia tree and a beautiful lilac tree, and there was also the layout of what looked like a garden that somebody had once loved. Aside from all that, there was lots of bindweeds, there was lots of Spanish bluebells growing everywhere, and it was very overgrown. At that point, we had no experience of gardening at all. The first thing that I did was I got some cottage garden books. I wasn't sure what plants to use, what trees to use. Any book that had cottage garden in the title was good for me. One of the first plants we put in the garden was the Paul Scarlet hawthorn tree. We got it really to add a bit of privacy to our garden and also colour. It's got beautiful bright pink flowers in May. One of the other things we did at the same time was to add a yew hedge all along this wall, because behind it is a grey breeze block wall, which doesn't look very nice, so we wanted a green backdrop, and then we also wanted to add some height for some more privacy. When I was a little girl, I used to read lots of Beatrix Potter books. It was quite a modern estate we lived on, so I'd always dreamed of having this kind of traditional, magical kind of garden that was overflowing with flowers and little paths, little windy paths. I wanted to be lost in a magical place. My early plant selections were very random. Yeah, I would go to the garden centre and I would see something that I liked the look of and I would just get it. I didn't think about how it would complement something else. Eventually, I learned it was better to make the planting more cohesive. One of the things that I've used throughout the border is the alliums, the purple allium Christophii, which is that round ball shape. So if I repeat that throughout the border, I've realised that adds a bit of rhythm. So I've tried to add successional planting. Michaelmas daisies are staggered throughout the border. They flower much later at the end of summer, so when everything else is going over, I've got these purple and pink Michaelmas daisies. I've tried to add some grasses as well. Grasses will go kind of golden in autumn time, and that adds some movement, and they're also kind of late summer interest as well. After having the garden for a few years, we started to really get a handle on how to grow things after we grew our own wedding flowers. But we still had all of our other hobbies, you know, like sporty things like cycling and things. In 2017, I fell very ill with an autoimmune disease. Couldn't do all the hobbies I used to do. I could walk from one end of the garden to the other, and I just did what I could do. We've got a shelter at the end of the garden, and the sun shines on it from 3 p.m. onwards. All I could do was lie down a lot of the time. So I'd go and lie in the shelter, and I'd feel the sun on my back, and I'd look at the plants, and I'd look at the bees. And it was, yeah, just that if I hadn't had that, I don't know what I would have done. My health is much better now. I can get on my bike, I can walk, I'm back at work. But now gardening's in me, I can't stop. Here we've got a wigwam, which is in the lawn, and I've combined purple sweet peas with purple French beans. I like to grow vegetables with the flowers at the same time, because I think it adds interest. If you grow some plants near the vegetables that attract beneficial insects, such as fennel, fennel can attract insects that will reduce the number of aphids in your garden, for example, so that's what I like to do. Paul has got a shade bit of the garden that he's put lots of ferns in. It's quite a long border in the shade, and he's managed to put lots of different types of ferns in there and lots of Japanese forest grass and hostas. So it's just his foliage garden. That's lovely. That's his style of garden. That's really cool. It's just not really for me. It's, yeah, my type of garden is just loads and loads of flowers, loads of different plants. Yeah, that's more my thing, lots of colour. Our daughter Sky was born in 2020, and she's beginning to explore the garden now. She absolutely loves coming outside. In fact, outside was one of the first words that I think she started to understand. So we'd hold up to the window and she would see the garden and she'd get excited. She loves to explore, she loves to pull the flower heads off, and she loves to eat the strawberries. So I can tell, yeah, she definitely got green fingers. There. Mummy, break it in half? Yeah, there you go. The garden means an incredible amount to our whole family now. It's something that is just a part of our life. I spend more time out in the garden than I do in the house. In fact, I view the garden as the place that I live. The house is just somewhere I go when I'm cold. I feel like I have managed to create the cottage garden of my dreams.
I can really relate to that thought, and certainly the garden here at Longmeadow is just as powerfully home as the house, and I think a lot of people will share that sentiment. The cottage garden now is reaching that lovely, fulsome softness that is part of the dream of an English cottage garden. And yet there's more to come. The roses haven't really begun. Some are just tantalizingly appearing, but I think in a week or two, this will just be full of roses. There's so much else happening. The foxgloves and the alliums and the lupins. These are all doing their thing in a kind of loose, free manner. And for about 6 weeks, the cottage garden is my favourite part of Longmeadow, because the planting here has a looseness that we've allowed to happen, but also happens on its own, almost despite us. It just sets off and takes its own path, and then you become a spectator, and I love that. Now, still to come on today's programme. Eric joins a team in London, turning neglected patches in the city into beautiful gardens that can be enjoyed by everybody.
We can't do anything about the structure of the rainforest, but we can do things about little local stuff near where we live.
Before it started to become a bit of like a dumping ground for people leaving like dishwashers and stuff, they've totally greened the area, put loads of flowers down, and it's just lovely to look at.
And I'll be checking up on my bees, as well as planting out my loofahs. But first it's time for the second visit to one of your gardens, and it belongs to Martin Bennett. Now, lots of us love dahlias, and certainly we grow lots here at Longmeadow, and I'm on record of saying that there are some begonias I'm learning to like. But Martin has a passion for both.
My garden is in Stockport, and I love begonias, so my greenhouse is full of them. And outside, plenty of dahlias. I love the variety of them, the shapes, the colours, the sizes, different heights. And round the pond here, named trailing begonias. And they've been flowering. They've been flowering since the end of June, and here we are, early September, and they seem to be getting even better. I have been focusing on the front garden because so many people have been walking past and enjoying seeing the plants. So here we have various tubs, cleome, which are a difficult plant to grow, the spider plant, and more dahlias. And once they start flowering, they just carry on. A splendid late summer plant.
If I'm honest, Martin, I'm not quite there with begonias yet, but like you, I do love dahlias. Now, here in the vegetable garden, let's have a little update, because the potatoes, the Charlotte potatoes that I planted, are now flowering. And when your spuds are flowering, that's the time to water. It's the most effective moment to both promote tuber growth and the size of tubers. Chard, great plant if things are dry. My peas have been a bit iffy. We've got Hurst green shaft, which the germination hasn't been too bad, but the pigeons have gotten them. However, the Shiraz, which are a Mange Tout variety, are doing very well. I don't know why there's a difference. I can't tell you. We've got broad beans, what looks like a bed of poppies. Actually, those are onions, and I just love the poppies. I can't bring myself to weed them. However, this bed is clear, and I've cleared it now for planting courgettes. Now, the bed is roughly 2 meters by 1, which means I've got room for just 2 courgette plants. As a rule of thumb, 1 meter square per courgette plant, and don't be tempted to plant them any closer than that. You won't get more fruit, you won't get better fruit. Now, that might seem a waste of space, but actually I'll plant the lettuce in amongst them, and I'll show you how in a minute, but let's get those out of the way just for a moment. I've got 3 different varieties here. I've got Tromboncino, I've got Polka and Defender. Now, Tromboncino is one of my favourites. It's a very curious shaped fruit. It's long and it's curves and it swells out at the end. It looks as though it's slightly misshapen, but its taste is second to none, and I love it. So I've got a couple of plants. They're not the healthiest looking plants, but they will be fine. Give them the centre of a metre square, and that's what you end up with. So let's take these out the way for the moment and put them down like that. Now, they love as much water and goodness as you can give them. But of all the cucurbits, these are the hardiest and actually the easiest to grow. So I'm just going to make a hole, pop it in nice and deep, push it down, make a slight ring around it so when we water it, the water really focuses in on the roots. Okay, now that will be fine, but we've got all this space which won't be used by the courgettes for at least another 4 weeks, which is why I've got the lettuce. This is a variety called Paris Island Cos. It's one of my favourites. It's a big cos lettuce, it's crisp, it's tasty, and I can plant these out, so I can put one in there like that, and I can put them in a grid, and by the time the courgettes grow and take up the space and cover it, I'll be eating these. And it could be any kind of lettuce, or spinach perhaps, or radish, anything that will grow quite quickly and be harvested quickly. You can intercrop, and they will work perfectly well side by side. Now, I've got the quirkily shaped Tromboncino growing in this bed with the lettuce, but I've got another much more conventional variety of courgette called Defender, and I think that will be ideal for a pot. Now, this is my container veg area, which is still got lots to go, but what we've done is going well. So we've got the Charlotte potatoes appearing, we've got lettuce growing in various guises, cabbages looking good, climbing beans, I must stake those, I'll do that later today. And of course the tomatoes in 3 different types of grow bag, actually all of them looking very happy. Now, this is for a container, but the container does need to be generous. I've got a 35-litre one here, and I would say that you really don't want anything less than 30 litres per courgette plant. Half fill it with garden compost, and then that can be topped up with a normal peat-free compost. And what the garden compost does is, as well as feed it, it contains more moisture, and that's really essential. So I've just topped that up like that. Just break that down and smooth it over. And plant it into the compost, and then the roots will find their way down to that extra goodness and extra moisture, and hopefully that will make up for the restriction in space. And I'm very confident that we'll get a good harvest from that. Okay, let's join Arit now. She went to London to visit a project which is taking all those odd bits and pieces of lost spaces that you get in any town or city, and very often are neglected. But they are setting about them to make them green and lovely.
I live in the city, and there are some beautiful parks and gardens. However, there are the scrappy bits around the edges, the pavements, the verges, where all the weeds and rubbish mingle, and it can be quite difficult to be close to nature. We can do more with these spaces, making them welcoming for plants, for wildlife, and for us. There is one woman who has single-handedly invested her time and effort in bringing all those things to her part of West London. Karen Liebrich started Abundance London 12 years ago to champion green spaces and bring local people together, to green up the tattier corners of Chiswick, which had long remained disused and abandoned. What's the idea behind all this?
Well, it's trying to do something. We're surrounded by biodiversity crisis. We can't do anything about destruction of the rainforest, but we can do things about little local stuff near where we live. So it's finding little patches, little corners that are wasted, that could be little pockets of beauty and biodiversity. And we need these little pockets, both for insect life and for people. So it's a way of having pride in your own area and being able to do something. And this is a very small but concrete thing that you can do. And you can see people walking past and smiling as they look at it.
Karen or local residents spot an area they want to improve, and it's Karen who gets permissions from the landowner or council. Together, they've revived over 25 spaces, ranging from a few square feet to larger areas like this one at Turnham Green Tube Station. Karen brought in designer Jutta Wagner to design a low-maintenance perennial meadow. It looks wonderful because there's geraniums, scabies, nautia, lovely alliums popping up. It's really wonderful.
Thank you very much. I'm really pleased it turned out like this. This is some sort of little plant community because plants which we have planted are gone, but others have replaced them. It's working. We also have to we have to fill some gaps because we had some of these gauras and they are gone because there are some gaps where foxes are lying or whatever. And so we have to replace some plants, which we are doing now.
This type of planting, has to self-sustain surely in an area like this?
Yes, because these plants, they are really happy without much watering once they are established. So in the first year, we had a guy from that pizza place who was watering it. And then, but last year and this year, the team didn't water this bed yet at all. And this is really quite something. But that's how it has to be here.
Yeah.
It's really nice to have all these plants here and all the bees and the butterflies and everything here in this noisy environment.
Looks fabulous. I guess we better get on and get it in.
Yeah.
It's just fantastic.
Yes.
The insects aren't the only ones to appreciate the profusion of plants. Do you often walk this way through the high street?
So I look in the local area and it really makes a massive change to the area, so it's been quite run down. There were lots of litter and now it's just a bright area to spend time at.
Getting public projects like this off the ground takes tenacity, and Karen has plenty of that.
It's not smooth sailing. You have to be resilient, but you also have to not take no for an answer and keep going for it.
The great thing about Karen's scheme is that people can get involved who don't have gardens or who just want to cheer up their corner of the city. Using donated plants and some grown from seeds, Karen also involves young people who are doing their Duke of Edinburgh Awards. Isaac, with the help from his dad Tom, is beautifying a plot which was badly in need of attention beside a major road. Well, I have to say, guys, you've been putting your back into preparing this bed.
Well, it was very difficult initially. The ground was horribly tough, especially as you go up. We actually had to acquire a pickaxe.
Pickaxe for gardening?
Pickaxe for gardening to get through all the roots and the rubble. It's a good place to do it because there's so many people that walk past, and hopefully it encourages other people to do the same sort of thing, maybe.
But it's in highly residential streets that Karen and her volunteers are making a huge impact on the local neighbourhood. Wow. It's so joyous. What was here before?
So these were just two empty tarmac corners, this one and that one. There used to be a willow tree in each corner, which the council had to take out. And then it was just empty tarmac. And people threw washing machines and things in. The trees had made cracks in the tarmac.
Yeah.
So we started planting into the cracks. We added some compost and it worked. But it's literally, if you look, it's tarmac. It's a question of choosing the right plants because nothing that nights a deep root is going to survive here. So got California poppies, Cicericium, fennel, verbena. The things that are here are really happy.
Thank you for stopping on your jog. I just wanted to know, what do you think of this area?
Oh, I absolutely love it because before it started to become a bit of like a dumping ground for people leaving like dishwashers and stuff. So since Abundance London have come in, they've totally greened the area, put loads of flowers down, and it's just lovely to look at because I live in the flat and I overlook this area. And it's just a real pleasure to look at instead of rubbish or fly tipping.
Karen has inspired so many people, and one of them is Jenny. They've been gardening together for the last 15 years.
As part of a member of the community, I enjoy working anything community-led. I'm there.
Is it the people, the plants, the lot of
everything, everything. And what gives me joy is people appreciate what you do, because everybody passes when they see you watering or weeding or whatever. Oh, thank you so much, it looks so good, and you know, that sort of thing. And for me, it offers me therapeutic value, because I've not been quite well, so it's a chance for me to get out among nature and, you know, just enjoy nature and feel good as well.
That's it. Well, that's the thing, isn't it? When you don't feel so good yourself, it's nice to be around other people. And these plants, I mean, how wonderful does this look?
Exactly. And it cheers you up. And almost boast to people that I live in an area which is so natural. I call it an oasis in the middle of a city.
Where does the motivation come to do all of this?
In general, it's just creating little pockets of defiant beauty. You see people walk past and they're just happy and they like it.
Well, look at it.
And it's full of insects as well, you know, bees and butterflies and stuff there.
Well, I have to say, it's incredibly impressive. What Karen demonstrates is we can all plant up those overlooked nooks and crannies of our cities and bring nature closer to us and making our neighbourhoods better places to be in. All we need is an ounce of her can-do attitude.
Who would have thought that you'd be able to plant into tarmac, into the cracks in tarmac? I mean, we all know that expression, right plant, right place, but to have tarmac as the right place is an amazing idea. And I loved that phrase, a little patch of defiant beauty.
Here at Longmeadow, we have 2 beehives in the orchard, and it's time for an inspection. I'm keen to get my beekeeping mentor, Gareth's, opinion on the health of the hives. And whilst he was making his preparations, I grabbed my suit and got a bit of a surprise.
I haven't put my bee suit on yet this year. Now, Gareth has come here today, so I've got it out, and I got it out the shed where it hangs up. About to put it on, and there, look. There's a robin's nest, and it's nested in my bee suit. Now, I know the young have left because there's been a very busy robin around there for the last few weeks. I couldn't work out where the nest was. Cheeky thing.
With the nest removed and us fully suited up, Gareth and I were able to get to the hives. The top bar hive was looking really healthy, with lots and lots of bees. And although there was a recent swarm, Gareth showed me a queen cell, which means a new queen has recently hatched and the colony will build up again. The other hive was also thriving, with plenty of bees, plenty of honey, plus some brood frames too. And when these hatch, there will be tens of thousands more bees. We left most of the honey for the bees to feed on, but Gareth extracted 4 frames to take away and process into liquid honey for us.
But he left me with this. Look at that. Now what about that, Nelly? A beautiful piece of honeycomb. Really delicious, and there's just something so special about that. And to have it from your own bees, and you know that that has been made from the flowers from Longmeadow, is a real luxury. Absolutely lovely. Now, we're going to the other side of the world now to visit the garden of Paul Dover. And for those of you who've been growing loofahs along with me, you may find this particularly interesting.
Hello Gardeners World, and welcome to Melbourne, Australia. Now, as we're in an opposite hemisphere, we are waiting for autumnal splendour while you in the northern hemisphere are basking in spring rejuvenation. You mentioned that you are growing loofahs, but I just want to show you how we grow our loofahs. This is our first season, but we're very pleased with our success. So here's our garden. It's not massive by any means, but I think what you will really like is our archway that is actually made with loofahs. So we have some young ones hanging here. My wife, who is of Vietnamese origin, and she recommends it's cooked in a soup with some sort of crustacean, usually prawn. I haven't tried it before, but I'm told it's a bit like zucchini. And then, of course, we have some quite mature specimens, such as this, that will be used for presents in the coming Christmas in the form of dried bathroom accessories. So that is our tip, growing a loofah on an arch, and it's worked really well for us. All the best, Monty, and to your viewers. Thank you.
Well, I never thought of eating loofahs before, Paul, but it's a good idea. And thanks for sending that. Mind you, your garden is a lot warmer than mine. These loofahs here are ready to be planted out. And I know some people do grow them outside, but loofahs grow best with as much heat as you can give them. And here at Longmeadow, we really don't have that sort of climate. So I'm going to actually take these up and plant them into the soil in the top greenhouse. Come on, good girl, good girl. Good girl. Off you go. Go on. Go on. Good girl. Last year, I filled this bed with tomatoes as well as the other one, and we had a fantastic crop, but we did have a lot. We're still eating them. We've still got a deep freeze full. So this year, I'm growing half as many tomatoes, and I'm going to have loofahs, cucumbers, peppers and aubergines filling this bed. Now, planting them is easy enough, and I've used these strings to support them because that system works well. But you obviously don't have to do that, and you can't if you don't have wires to support it. If you use a cane, make sure it's fixed, or have a wigwam with 3 canes, but they will grow big and they'll grow quite heavy, so get your support in early. And when you're using the strings, the technique is to dig a hole, and I just simply tie a couple of knots at the bottom of the string, put it underneath the plant it, and make sure it's taut. And as the roots grow, that anchors the string. And this is coir hop twine. Right, I'm going to start in the corner. Let's get in there first. So, dig a hole. Measure my string down there. Tie a nice knot. That goes on there. Firm it in, nice and firm. Okay. Come down there. That's going down there, so we'll make a knot. A bigger one. That's good. You can see there's a good root system on there. They're ready to go out into the soil, and hopefully they will start to romp. And already we can twist that round there, so that's got some support. Right, that goes in there. Push it down firmly. Give that a little twine in there. Right, they are now in. I'm only going to plant 3 because even if you eat them, there are only so many loofahs that anybody could want. So that's shown you how you can plant your loofahs, and I hope that yours are looking roughly like mine. Now I'm going to water these in right now. It is very important both to water them in and keep them watered. And they will need that more and more as they get bigger and bigger. But while I'm doing this, here's some jobs that you can do this weekend. If your broad beans are smothered with black fly, don't worry, this won't affect the production of beans. But it's a good idea to pinch out the tops of the plant, which will remove the soft, succulent growth they're attracted to, and also promote the bean production in the pods below. It's not too late to do the Chelsea chop. Now what this means is cutting back late flowering perennials like Rebeckias, Heleniums or Asters. This will result in a number of effects. The first is to stagger the heights of the plants. The second is to delay flowering in those you cut back, so therefore extend your flowering season. And also by cutting them back, you'll promote more side shoots, which means more flowers. It's too early in the year to cut any hedges without the risk of disturbing nesting birds. But it's a good idea to lightly trim back the vertical faces of any gaps in hedges, the points where you pass in and out. And this will have the effect of crisping up the whole garden. I've got a Nautia macedonica here in the border, and I remember I planted them in the pots and deliberately used quite a gritty, thin mix of potting compost to encourage them to grow nice and upright. Here in the richness of the border, they flop. They've grown huge already, and there's plenty more growing to do. They haven't yet started to flower, but they can't support their own weight. They've evolved to cope with poor conditions, so I need to stake them. It vindicates using that particular compost mix in the pots. So at this time of year, in order to keep the succession going, I do go around staking. And what I love about the dual garden from now on in is we get these waves of colour and performance. The Nautia will be coming through in about a week's time. At the moment, it's the oriental poppies that are dominating the scene with their incredible intensity of reds and oranges. But that will move on, and as a gardener, there is this feeling that you're orchestrating it, you're a conductor. You're not actually doing it yourself. All you can do is just make sure everything is in the best possible condition to perform. Now, we've run out of time today, and our performance is going to be delayed here at Longmeadow for a couple of weeks, because next week I shall be at Gardeners World Live with the rest of the team, and the highlight of it for me will be to see Francis's first show garden. And that's at 8 o'clock next Friday, and then we'll be back here at Longmeadow the following Friday. So until then, bye-bye.